Today, I thought we would do something different and focus more on the famous ride of Paul Revere. As we learned yesterday, his purpose was to ride to Lexington and Concord to warn all of the American colonists that the British were coming. Alright, so let's get to the story about Paul Revere's famous midnight ride. Pictures are all included, and so is the text. Listen, my children, and you shall hear of the midnight ride of Paul Revere. On the 18th of April in 75, hardly a man is now alive who remembers that famous day and year. He said to a friend, if the British march by land or sea from the town tonight, hang a lantern aloft in the belfry arch of the North Church tower as a signal light. One if by land and two if by sea, and I on the opposite shore will be, ready to ride and spread the alarm through every Middlesex village and farm, for the country folk to be up and to arm. Then he said good night, and with muffled oar silently rowed to the Charlestown shore, just as the moon rose over the bay, where swinging wide at her moorings lay the Somerset British man of war, a phantom ship with each mast and spar, across the moon like a prison bar, and a huge black hulk that was magnified by its own reflection in the tide. Meanwhile, his friend, through alley and street, wanders and watches and eager ears, till in the silence around him he hears the muster of men at the barrack door. Then he climbed to the tower of the old North Church, by the wooden stairs, with stealthy tread, to the belfry chamber overhead, and startled the pigeons from their perch on the sombre rafters that round him made masses and moving shapes of shade, by the trembling ladder, steep and tall, to the highest window on the wall, where he paused to listen and look down a moment on the rooftops of the town, and the moonlight flowing over all. Meanwhile, impatient to mount and ride, booted and spurred with a heavy stride, on the opposite shore walked Paul Revere. Now he patted his horse aside, now gazed at the landscape far and near, then impetuous stamped the earth, and turned and tightened his saddle girth. But mostly he watched with eager search the belfry tower of the old North Church, as it rose above the graves on the hill, lonely and spectral and sombre and still. And lo, as he looks on the belfry's height, a glimmer and then a gleam of light. He springs to the saddle, the bridle he turns, but lingers and gazes till full on his sight a second lamp in the belfry burns. That was all, and yet through the gloom and the light, the fate of the nation was riding that night, and the spark struck out by that steed in his flight kindled the land into flame with its heat. It was 12 by the village clock when he crossed the bridge into Medford town. He heard the crowing of the cock and the barking of the farmer's dog, and felt the damp of the river fog that rises after the sun goes down. It was 1 by the village clock when he galloped into Lexington. He saw the gilded weathercock swim in the moonlight as he passed, and the meeting house windows, blank and bare, gaze at him with spectral glare, as if they were already stood aghast at the bloody work that would look upon. So through the night rode Paul Revere, and so through the night went his cry of alarm to every Middlesex village and farm, a cry of defiance and not of fear, a voice in the darkness, a knock at the door, and a word that shall echo for evermore. For born on that night wind of the past, through all our history to the last, in the hour of darkness and peril and need, the people will awaken and listen to hear the hurrying hoofbeats of that steed, and the midnight message of Paul Revere. So that ends our story about Paul Revere today. On Monday, we're going to pick up with the book that we were reading about the American Revolution and see where everything goes. Everybody have a great weekend and take care.